So now that we have a new covenant, and we're not under the rules and the regulations and the civil guidelines and statutes of the old covenant, of the old law, we have now an empowerment to do the things that God has written on our hearts. We now have an empowerment to perform and to do the things that God has imprinted on our mind. Because he says we read in Hebrews 8, I will put my laws in their mind and write it on their hearts. So God did not just put it there and just left us to our own device to figure out how to execute those or put those in action to perform them. He gave us an empowerment in order to do that. First one I want to give you, the first empowerment is by the Spirit of God. We are empowered to perform what is written on our hearts and has been put on our mind, imprinted on our mind by the Spirit of God. Secondly, by the grace of God. God bestowed a grace upon the Macedonians that even in their hardship, they were able to give and give so joyfully and give so cheerfully. What does that mean? Remember I spoke about this in my points about this empowerment. This empowerment is a grace. What it simply means a unmerited favor. What God does, this I like the way this one author explained it. What God does by bestowing His grace upon us, He gives us favor, and it causes us to, in turn, to give favor to others. So when He gives, and if you are His, and His laws are written on your heart and put in your mind, then when God gives you a grace, or He blesses you with something out of nowhere, then you are then in turn excited about doing the same thing for others. So this is how this grace works in the Macedonian life. And this was Paul is saying to the Corinthians, hey, God gave them a grace. God blessed them somehow even in the midst of their trial, and now they recognize that, wow, if it wasn't for God, He causes us by His Spirit working on the inside of us to now perform the things that is written on our heart. He performs the statute of sowing and reaping. He performs in us the statute of giving cheerfully and purposing in our heart what to give. You see, you cannot be free from the guilt of not tithing if you have not experienced first the freedom of God's grace and love in your life. It's when you experience, wow, God's grace and His love, you don't need no laws to tell you how you should give and when you should give. You're going to do it because now God has turned up, if you will, the grace in your life. And the only way you can respond if you are His is by being graceful yourself. So God, how is it that Paul would write to give God loves a cheerful giver in the context of chapter 9? So what I thought I heard in my spirit last night is that when you are free to do something, you do it happily. God says, I don't have cheerful givers out there because they're not giving freely. They're giving out of necessity or out of obligation to what so-and-so has said or what they understand of the law. But until they can give freely, they'll never be able to experience a hilarious or a cheerful giving.